The news, a woman who was a popular dance instructor is dead after an Amtrak train hit her SUV. It happened in South Suburban University Park last night.
Crews remain at the scene here tonight investigating that fatal crash. They're also checking the crossing signals here. That dance instructor's SUV was just no match for a passing Amtrak train that slammed into her, killing her, leaving a dance community in mourning.
What up? This is K&K, and we're here today to bring you a little jingle. It's August 22nd. We're here at the Brett Armand Sarcoma Foundation fundraiser on this beautiful golf course. Ready? Here we go. What's up? How you doing? This is K&K. Come to the golf course and have a fun-filled day. Hit some marshmallows, win a sweet car, but won't win nothing if you shoot a par. You can go home with some bogeys or shoot one in the sand, but this one is for Brutus, so put up your hands. We sit in this golf cart on the 17th hole. You don't know us? Go swing a funny pole. When you drive by, give us a wave, 'cause we be sitting here for hours on this special day. If you drop some dollars when you walk in the door, might end up with Bulls tickets on the b-ball floor. So we be rapping this song all day long, while Brutus looks down on us on this golf course lawn. Peace. Special K production.
Waiting for the bus on the corner of Lakeshore and Irving Park. Not a fun ride. It's kind of cold. My ears are numb. Not feeling so good. What about you, Cal?
As you can see, Katie had quite the personality. She was really outgoing. She liked to do a lot of different things. It was a golf outing for a friend of theirs, Brett Armand, who had died of sarcoma cancer. And Katie had asked me to go to an event. And back then I was working full-time, obviously, and I couldn't find the time to go. The first year I didn't go. She really wanted me to go. The second year she asked me to go, and I said, okay. So me and my wife, we went over and we went to it. And the minute we pulled into the golf course and Katie got out of the car, Brett Armand's parents come out and just gave her a big hug. And I found out things that day that I didn't know about Katie. You know, some of the things that she did. Katie did stuff, a lot of different things. She didn't do them for credit for doing things. She just did them to try to be a nice person. But when Brett was going through this cancer, battling cancer and going through all the chemo and everything that he was doing, obviously it was very trying on his parents constantly, because this was a process, right, as he passed away. But Katie would go in on Sundays, and she wasn't a football watcher, but she would go sit on Sundays and watch football with Brutus, just to give his parents a break so they could go away for the afternoon or whatever and have a little bit of time alone. You know, as you travel into this part of your life, know how beautiful you are inside and out. Each of us has a reason to be here on earth, and discovering what that is one of the world's most enjoyable experiences. Enjoy every moment, laugh often, love unconditionally, inspire youth, enjoy your passion, appreciate family, friends, and nature, remain humble, keep a journal, dream big, and know you are loved. Smile, love always, Miss Katie. That was Katie in a nutshell. She really believed that everybody had a reason to be on earth, and figuring out what that was kind of, that was one of the charms in life. She really enjoyed gymnastics, dance, that kind of thing, and once she got into high school, she was really focused on the dance aspect of things, and she was very focused on cheerleading. She was an all-state cheerleader for 3 years, her sophomore, junior, and senior year in the state of Iowa, which was good. She was inducted into the National Honor Society when she was a junior, and she was also very active in the Young Life Christian group, went throughout high school. After graduating from Oklahoma City University, the only thing she really wanted to do was teach dance or participate in dance, but she got on with the School of Performing Arts in Naperville, Illinois, and she was a dance administrator and an instructor for them. She also taught tap at the Joffrey Ballet in downtown Chicago, and then she danced professionally for a company called Dance Chicago and then Hip Hop Connection. They would go into schools And they would do things like at halftimes of sporting events. They did it for the Chicago Bulls even at halftime. They tried to influence kids to do the right thing is what they was really trying to do. So I thought that was quite the thing. Katie, in her years of teaching, she taught kind of all ages, everything from small children to adults. But her real passion was like junior high school kids, you know, maybe 5th, 6th grade up to seniors in high school and even college kids. You know, she loved that because when she would teach them, she would try to incorporate things in the choreography that would teach them like life lessons. I wish I had videos to show some of the choreographies that she did, because they had a young girl that had struggled with cancer, and she got through it and overcame it and everything. And she was the center of the dance piece that they did, and the kids kind of danced around. The girl was a really good dancer, and she'd come up. Then at the end of the thing, they just all pointed to the heaven, you know. I worked for Georgia Pacific, and we moved around a lot. I lived in 6 different states, you know, over a 10-year period. So obviously they moved, and this was when Katie was anywhere from 2 years old to 12 years old, basically, that whole moving time and period. So when you move around that much, and a lot of you guys in the industry, and you guys move around a lot as well, but you really become relying on your own family, because you come really close, because that's all you got. You go someplace, and until you can meet friends and do things, you know, you just have your family. So we became very, very close as a family, and we remained close as a family even after our kids got married and moved on, you know. The evening before she headed back to Chicago, I had to leave for work in the morning, and she was going to get up and leave after that, and I didn't want to wake her up, so I gave her a big hug and stuff and told her that Julie and I would be there, you know, in about 2 weeks, because we had a trip planned, because Katie had gotten a new apartment, not realizing that would be the last time we'd see her alive. You know, there's traumatic things just really stick with you, and that's what makes this hard, because I kind of relive some of this stuff every time I do this. But the one thing that I picture like I'm there right now, we had it was about 2:30 in the morning, and my wife's and my bedroom kind of faces the driveway, so a car had pulled in, and you could see the light, because we have a transom window above the window, and you could see the light coming in. I was like, oh, so Julie goes, wonder what that is. So I opened the door, and it was a sheriff's car. I go, it's a sheriff's car. She goes, well, this can't be good. So I went to the front door, the doorbell rang, I went to the front door, opened the door, and he asked me if I had a daughter named Katie that lived in Chicago, and I said, yes, I did. He told me that she'd been in an accident, and I go, is she okay? And he goes, well, I don't really know the details. He goes, I have a number for you to call. So I called the number, and it was the Will County Sheriff in Chicago area, and he had told me that Katie had been killed. You know, the first thing is, my first question out of my mouth was, did she try to drive through the crossing? What happened, you know? And my wife, I just never forget it. The sound she made. She fell down on the floor.
Lunn, a popular local dance instructor, was pronounced dead last night after her silver SUV was struck by a northbound Amtrak train at the crossing near Stunkel Road and Governor's Highway in University Park just after 9:30.
We're investigating a car versus train, which involved one fatality, being the driver of the actual vehicle that was hit.
The train, carrying 155 passengers, struck Katie's vehicle as she was returning home to Chicago. She had spent the evening watching her dancers rehearse for a performance that was to be held today at Governors State University. Katie was a dance instructor and manager at the School of Performing Arts in Naperville for the past 6 years. Today, her dance troupe dropped out of the competition to mourn her loss.
Then we saw smoke in the air, and my heard a loud noise.
Jenny Jones of Wisconsin, who's in town for today's performance, witnessed last night's crash and says no signal sounded and no gates came down to warn of an oncoming train.
There was no guardrails down, there was no lights. After the train screamed by, then the guardrails came down and the lights came on for about 30 seconds and then they popped right back up.
Today, engineers from Canadian National Railway, which owns the tracks, were at the scene checking to see if there was perhaps a malfunction with the signal system. Jenny says it was an accident waiting to happen.
There would have been no way to see that train. There was no way to stop for that or see it coming.
And Katie lived in the Lincoln Park neighborhood and was a professional dancer. She was actually scheduled to perform with her dance group, Hip Hop Connection, tomorrow. It will no doubt be an emotional and sad day as her dance partners mourn her tragic loss.
The days following the crash, they're, excuse me, they're pretty undescribable, you know. You go through every emotion. You go through sadness. You go through disbelief. I told my wife, well, maybe it's not her, you know, maybe it wasn't her. You go through anger, you know, 'cause you hear, all I heard was the news articles and stuff, you know, that I didn't know what happened. And so you go, I was really angry at the railroads, you know. When I talked to the sheriff, he said that, he told me that she didn't do anything wrong, which, you know, to this day I wish she would have looked, you know, but I don't know, she didn't. You truly question your faith in God. You know, why would God take her? She was kind of all about doing good for people. Yeah, so why was it her? Why couldn't it have been the car ahead of her or the car behind her? You know, you'll see when I show you in a little bit where this occurred and how the traffic was backed up and what was all going on. But so that's why I asked myself, why couldn't it have been the car ahead of her? Why couldn't it have been the car behind her? But then after I learned more and more about what happened, I realized that the car ahead of her had a family in it. The car behind her had a mother and like 4 or 5 of her students in it. So you realize, you know, it was probably good that it wasn't one of those two, right? Then you ask yourself, why couldn't it have been me? You know, why did it have to take her? Why couldn't it have been me? You know, I was 52 at the time. Then you realize nothing you can really do that can change it. You know, it doesn't. It is what it is. You can't change it. When her body was brought back to Iowa, you know, we had a viewing just for immediate family members. I don't know if any of you guys ever talked to your children about what they believed in. Do they believe in, you know, cremation? You know, that's not something that we talk to our kids about, so we had no idea. So we made the decision to have her cremated, but we had a viewing for immediate family before that. And I just remember during the viewing, we, as a family, because when we traveled around so much and we'd come back to Iowa, you know, when we'd leave, we wouldn't say goodbye. We'd say, see you later all the time. We always say, see you later. We just had this thing, we didn't really say goodbye. So when I went up to the casket, I'm good. I reached down and rubbed my hand through her hair and told her I'd see her later. After the funeral, you have to try to move on with life. So you try to find things to keep yourself occupied. My wife, she was committed to putting together a foundation. I don't know if that showed or not, but it was the Keep the Smile Alive Foundation for Katie, and that was a really good thing. It kept her busy. I committed myself really to trying to figure out what happened, because there was really never a clear reason. Everybody said the signals didn't work. Well, why didn't the signals work? What happened? So I waited, and I'd go to the FRA website, and it would say investigation pending. It was pending for over a year and a half before they finally posted something. And I'd written a letter to that Sabo, I guess he was the head of the FRA at the time, and I never got any kind of response. I wrote a letter to Ray LaHood, who was the head of all the transportation department or whatever. Once I wrote that letter, then I got a response from them, and they explained to me in pretty good detail what they felt the causes were. So anyway, that was 20 months after the accident that they actually posted something on their website of what it was, and that's when I got a response. But even when you read through that, it still didn't, in my mind, it didn't identify what a root cause was, what really happened. On April 16th, 2012, which was exactly 2 years after Katie's death, her death was April 16th, 2010, exactly 2 years after the date, I had a meeting with Keith Creel. He was the chief operating officer at Canadian National, and that was through our whole settlement process that we were going through. One of the things that I really requested was a meeting with him so that I could see what I could do, what we could do together to try to make sure this doesn't happen again to somebody. And even then, I didn't really know what was happening, what had happened. So I had the opportunity to meet with him. I went to his office. I want to say it was in Homewood. I think that was where the office was. I went there and I met with him, and I remember going in there, I was so nervous. I was just so nervous. I had this investigation report in my hand, and I was so nervous, and when I went in there and I told him that I'm just very nervous, and he goes, "Sir," he goes, I'm very nervous too. He goes, "This should have never happened." And I'll tell you, I went through that investigation report that I had just in detail. I went through it all with him. Mr. Creel, he just listened intently. And after I got done, he said to me, he says, "Can I tell you what really happened?" I go, "Absolutely." And he goes, there was no communication. It was a lack of communication between the installation crew and the test out crew. He said that it was a 2-day job that went into the 3rd day. And it was a Thursday, Friday, and it was going into Saturday to finish. Well, the test out crew thought it was completed, and nobody had contacted them and said that it wasn't. So they went in and they went through the testing procedures or whatever. There was some things in the testing procedure, obviously, that they failed to do properly, that would have identified the fact that signal, the grade crossing, was not functional, but they missed it. Because they apparently, I don't know enough about it, I guess, to really get into a whole lot of details about it. But when I was reading the thing last night, and I found that it said they had a policy within Canadian National that you could only put one stop order on a crossing. So then, when the test out crew got done, they came in. There was still a stop order on it. They did their test out or whatever. And they took the stop order off, and that opened the train up. Well, if they would have had the ability to have a stop order for the installation crew and a stop order for the test out crew, the test out crew wouldn't have been able to disable or to take that stop order off the crossing. But because it wasn't that way, the test out crew took the stop order off for the whole process, and the process wasn't done. So I thought that was interesting, because that would have, if that would have been in place at the time, that would have made a big difference. Governor State University was over here, like over this way, and the cars were all backed up right here coming to this. There's a 4-way stop sign right here. This is Governor's Highway here. This is going north. This is coming south. This is the train that was coming north on this track right here, coming north. The cars were backed up, and as they were pulling forward, there's the bungalow right there. So the train was going north, the cars are backed up, and as one car would go across, the other car would come. And there was comments, and again, I've read all the depositions on this and everything, and there was comments that somebody had said that she had stopped on the track. She had not stopped on the track. She was moving across the track, and as the cars were moving ahead of her, she was moving forward as well. I'm not saying that Katie didn't have blame. Katie should have looked. She should have, anytime you go across the crossing, you should look, right? But I do believe as the public, me being the public, I can tell you how many train tracks I go across, and I don't look both ways when I go. If it's free to go, I go. That's no different than a green light at a stoplight. If it's green, I go. I don't look both ways to see if a car's coming and going to ram into me. So I will give her credit for that. She thought it was clear to go. It was at night. It was at 9:30 at night, and it was again in April, so it was dark out. My wife and I, we ended up going to University Park to pick up her personal belongings that she had that was inside of her vehicle. And when we went there and when we came back that night, it was dark out, and it gave me, I guess, the opportunity to see what she saw. And as you're come up to that grade crossing, and you look to the left, and you see the Governor's Highway is a very busy highway, so you see all kinds of lights coming from this direction down here as you get up there. And you can't distinguish the difference between personally, I don't believe you could have distinguished the difference between a train light and automobile lights as they were coming, because there was just so much traffic on that particular road. So maybe it's me making excuses for her or whatever, but I just don't see how you would have seen it. If you go through the report, the engineer on the Amtrak train blew his horn, did everything he was supposed to do. In fact, everything he did was right. He did everything he possibly could. He seen the cars coming. He tried to stop. He hit the brakes right when he seen the car come in front of him, but obviously that's way too late. The supervisor that was there for the test out crew and one tech came back to watch a full-speed train come through at 9:30 at night. That's when this Carbondale to Chicago Amtrak train was coming through, and so you had the electronics guy go inside the bungalow, and he was watching the approach of the train from 100% to 0, or 0 to 100, however it goes. The supervisor was out watching the automobiles and stuff, watching what was going on and watching for the train approach. And he ran to the door and said, "Put the gates down, put the gates down." And the guy inside the bungalow, he said he was working on the one side, and it was kind of set up like a horseshoe. They had the motor control center was in the center. He was on the one side, and the only thing he could think to do to drop the gates was to pull a card on the gate system, which was on the other side. So we got up and he started to run around the other side, and he no more than got to the end of the motor control center, and he heard the impact. So nothing happened. The supervisor that was there said that he started running towards the cars, yelling and stop, stop. And he said that he seen. The question was asked, did you see the occupant in the vehicle? And he says, "What did you see?" And he goes, you could see that she looked up and she just had a sign of horror on her face. She was just, so you look at all those things, and the Amtrak train was traveling within the speed limit of the train. Was, I think, 79 mile an hour was the maximum speed, and it was going 78. So that was all. Everything was right. It was just the fact that the crossing signal didn't work. I always say to myself, and again, this is 15 years ago, so communications have changed even since then, but even 15 years ago, you had cell phone text messaging, you had numerous ways to communicate back and forth on things. And to me, to see that the failure was because of the lack of communication, it just, that really hurt, because that was something I know could have been so preventable. I do know that Mr. Creel, when I talked to him, he said that they put a process in place that made one person responsible for the sign off anytime something was taken out of service to be put back into service, that one person had to sign off everything. So it was one person's responsibility to make sure everything was completed. And after I heard that, at least I felt that the public was safe then, because I was concerned if what was going on, that the public wasn't safe. I worked for Georgia Pacific for 37 years, and through Georgia Pacific, we had fatalities within our company, and we were manufacturing facilities, right? So we didn't have things that affected the public like you all do, but we had fatalities within our business, and until everybody said, hey, this has got to stop, and we really changed our focus from looking. We tracked recordable injuries, we tracked lost time injuries and that kind of thing. Well, we've really changed our focus to looking at leading indicators like near misses. If something would happen, like you'd see an operator or something, he'd have a cut on his hand, and you'd look at it and go, what happened there? And he goes, every time I do this, whatever, every once in a while I bump this thing and it get cut. Well, if that's the case, let's fix this thing so it doesn't cut you when you're by it, right? So we made some changes on those kind of things. And again, it sounds like little things, but there's little things that become big things. In our industry, when you're making gypsum wallboard and you get a high center and you're stacking them, 9 units high, and if you got a high center, they start to wobble. You put that last one on the top and it's not safe. So we had limits. You had to measure the board before you took it off the line between the center and the edge, and if the difference was more than a certain amount, then you didn't stack them only 2 high or 4 high or whatever, you put a limit on it. Because there was a fatality, not in our plant, with our company, but with another company, where the whole tier of board fell over and crushed a guy because he was putting down risers for the next load to put in when he was taking it off the machine and sticking it in the warehouse, and the whole tier fell over and crushed him. So, you do things based on, and obviously that wasn't a leading indicator, that was a lagging indicator, because somebody was killed, which caused us to make a real big look at what we were doing, similar to what you guys all have done now. So I really look at you guys to focus on leading indicators and that kind of thing. I know that you guys have a lot of procedures, and the guys that are on the ground doing the job, they're probably scratch their head sometimes. Why do we got to do this? Why do we got to do that? Procedures are so important. But the employees to have a check off, a sign off, or something that they've completed all those procedures every time they do them is so important. The other thing that is I feel is, especially with automation, how things have changed so quickly anymore, is you got to have a change process in place. Like if something's changed in a process, you got to review the procedures and make sure that the procedures represent the new change in the process. And if you don't have that in place, then bad things are going to happen. So I look at operators and I say that the only person that can change is them, right? Is the person. You got to know your procedures, follow your procedures. If something's missing in a procedure, they've got to stop. They've got to make sure the procedure is corrected. The one thing we really got to work with people on is making sure that if they see, I don't care what the tenure of an employee is, they see somebody making an error, whether it's an older person seeing a younger person, or somebody that's a younger person seeing an older person skipping a process or skipping a step to save time, or whatever it is they've got to be vocal and respectfully vocal, but they got to be vocal in the fact that, hey, we've got to do that. There's a reason that we're doing that, and the people that are working for you, the people that are on the line, they've got to have that understanding that they're doing that to make us safe, make us better, right? Because again, you have employees that can get hurt, but you have the public that can get hurt as well. So you really got to have employees involved, and they've got to own the process. They've got to own the steps that's doing it. The big thing that is important is you can't belittle somebody. If somebody's doing something wrong, don't belittle them. Just be factual. This is what we got to do. This is why we got to do it. We don't want to have another Katie situation. Your jobs are critical. You know, again, I compare it with the airline industry. I have a cousin he flies, and he is like a King Air 200. He gets on that plane and he goes through this is a home private plane, but he goes through everything on that plane. You know, all these checks, he goes through and makes sure everything's functional before it even starts the engine. You know, he makes sure all these things are done. He doesn't walk around the plane before he takes off. He does all those things. He does it just to protect himself and the few passengers that he has with him. But we look at the airline industry that has multiple people in them. You know, the public is definitely at risk, just like y'all. I mean, the public is so much at risk. I really stress the fact that when people come across a grade crossing and it's a signal grade crossing and everything's go, people just go. They don't think twice that it's not working, you know. So it's so important. You know, there's only one person that can make a difference, and that's, you know, you all, the people that work for you all. You know, I mean, that's, if you can get them to buy in, you know, we don't want to have another incident like that happened to our daughter. You know, it's been 15 years, and I tell you, does it get easier? It gets different, right? It gets different. There's still, you wonder, would she be married? Would she have kids? You wonder all those things. And I know that I'm not the only person here that's lost a child. You guys, everybody has those same thoughts and things, but I guess the disappointing part to me was it was so preventable. So again, anything you guys can do to make sure that somebody doesn't have to bend over that casket and tell them we'll see you later, you know. Appreciate it. Any help you can give me. So.
My name is Joseph McDonald, Senior Manager for Construction for Canadian National. I look after the Eastern region. I was really trying to think about what to say here over the last week when I was asked to speak, but I just really look back at how Katie really changed the way that I thought about signals, right? At that time, I was a signal supervisor for about 6 months. I was working on the Kingston sub, class 5 track, 105 mile an hour VIA trains. We were putting in the triple track for the VIA, putting in a lot of GCP 4000s, basically from Cornwall all the way to Toronto, in different areas, a lot of crossings tied together. And a very, very young crew. Even myself, 3 years on, very junior into the job, I was the most experienced guy. Of all the guys that worked for me, next guy was 9 months. He was a mechanic. How do I get this job done? That was my biggest thing, right? How do I do it safely? How do I protect these guys, right? How do I protect myself? How do I learn? We did our first CTC upgrade. Did not go very well. Supposed to be 5 days, just outside of Belleville, right, in Moira. Ended up going about 8 days, 24 hours around the clock. A lot of mistakes made by my crew. A lot of things that I could have checked up on afterwards, and these are all afterthoughts. Learned a lot of lessons. And then we were moving over to Brockville, Ontario. 10 miles of triple track between Mallorytown and Leeds, and all brand new crossings, farmers crossings. There's 23 crossings in that 10 miles, a lot of them all tied together. And again, a very junior crew. As we had built it, we started making plans for the cutover. And then we heard about Katie. The incident down there happened. We heard about the Amtrak, and we were getting ready. And it really made me think about the processes that we had in place, right? That easily could have been my guys. It could have been my crew. My boss, came to me and said, what can we do better? And I said, well, I think we need to be more detailed. I think we need to communicate more. I think we need to be more thorough, and we need to spend more time with those young guys in the field. Explain to them what the dangers were, right? What the actions that we're doing, how can it impact down the line? How can we have a flawless cutover? Because we were mostly just thinking about train movements. We weren't thinking about the traffic going through the crossing. So we started the brainstorm. What can we do better? How can we protect the public? And those were very formative things for me as a supervisor at that time, and learning and coming up with processes around crossings. Well, why don't we just close the road? We'll put a GBO, we'll take the crossing out, we'll do our work, and just close the road. Can't do it all the time, but for that instance, we did. We closed the road. And I'm glad we did, because there were a few more mistakes that we learned to get that crossing up and running. We were expecting to be ready in 12 hours, and we weren't ready for about 24 hours. And then that got us thinking again, right? When we're going out with these guys and deactivating crossings. And the biggest thing that I learned is, as a supervisor, is take the time, spend the time with your employees. If they've never deactivated a crossing before, get up 2300, get your butt out in the field and work with the guys. Make sure they're following the processes. Make sure they understand how they're deactivating the crossing. Make sure they understand how they're reactivating the crossing. And that played me a lot of dividends. And it's still paying me dividends today, is spending time with those guys, because a lot have been around for 15, 16, 17 years. And they remember the time that we were on the VIA project. And they remember the time that I came out with them, at 11 o'clock at night, and spent the night with them after being out there all day as well. And I found that, just spending that time with your employees, following up with your employees, making sure they're following the process, and why that process is in place, we refer back to Katie, right? I also refer back to another gentleman named Harley McCool. He was an apprentice on my gang at that time. His father was struck and killed by a GO train on the Kingston sub under safety watch. That's why we no longer do safety watch on the Kingston sub. It was a lot of formative stuff for us at that time. Spend the time with your employees, right? Go out there with them, make sure they understand, right? If you have questions yourself as a junior supervisor, I had a lot of questions. Find those people that know the answer, right? And rely on them, and don't be scared. But pretty much what I have, and I would like to thank you for sharing your story. It very much inspired my people that were working with me, very junior signals at the time, and we still talk about it today, right? When we were out in the VIA project and doing all these crossings and the things we did, and some of the processes we came up with to try to protect the public and protect ourselves, because we weren't always thinking about that at the time. We were thinking about train movements.
I'm going to talk about CPKC, and we're centered. Our safety culture is centered around home safe. Okay, home safe is really simple. It's about caring for one another. It's caring for the person that stands beside you and next to you. It's having the courage to see something and say something. If you see somebody putting themselves at risk, have the courage to walk up to them and say, hey, I don't think that's the right thing to do. Let's try this instead. And if you are that person that somebody approaches and says something to you, be mindful and have respect for the courage that they had to come up to you, and they're looking out for you. That's their intent, is to make sure that you get home at the end of the day to your loved ones. Okay? That's what Home Safe is all about at CPKC. And I would challenge the rest of the industry to do the same thing, to have the same perception of what good looks like each and every day. Okay, what we do in the signaling industry, it touches a lot of things. Okay, but most importantly, we touch the public day in and day out. That's what we do for a living. Okay, our jobs are about safety. The safety of our crossings, the safety of our signal systems that our train crews run up and down the tracks on, and most importantly, it's the interaction with the public day in and day out. So for me, home safe just isn't about CPKC employees. It's about home safe for everyone. Okay, and that's the message that I'd like you to go home with today. CPKC is committed to remembering Katie, and as John alluded to, we have developed Katie panels in our grade crossing warning systems. It's a panel that simplifies the crossing deactivation process through our design teams, through an engineering, through many of you that help us out in the industry today. And I am proud to say that with the merger of CP and the Kansas City Southern Railway, this year we are implementing those Katie panels south of Kansas City in our crossings, okay? And we will continue to do so until every crossing is equipped with them, okay? We are going to continue with deactivation training for our Kansas City side of our network. Training is happening today. Training is happening tomorrow for that group, and training will continue to happen throughout our team in the S&C world to continue the commitment to Katie. Okay. Last but not least, I am a proud signalman. I've spent 30 years in this industry. I came from a laborer on the end of a shovel, working my way up through the ranks. So I know signaling. Okay, and I know the commitment, I know the hard work that it takes to do the jobs that all of us do here today. And I'm very proud to know that I also was a part with implementing the deactivation policy at CPKC. So just as a last reminder to each and every one of you that do that task day in and day out, and I'm looking at the back room over there because I know there's an awful lot of you back there that do this task day in and out. This is I hope this resonates with each and every one of you. Whenever you go to your vehicle and you take a jumper out or you take a track shunt and the intended purpose is to deactivate a crossing, remember Katie. Thank you.
After hearing this story, what are each of you going to do to drive to Jeff's point, the go home safe, whatever you call it, right? Because we're all doing actions that this similar story happened, from deactivating crossings to working on track to driving home to whatever. There's lessons out of this that you could apply in your daily lives. So please kind of be a safety champion, as I call it. Make sure the safety lights are going on in your team members and make a difference.